Shall we start? We're just a few minutes ahead of time. Hello, hello one and all. A warm welcome to this much awaited session on education and technology, the coming of the digital dimension in education. And I'm Dr. Rajashree here, and I'm going to be the moderator for this evening. We have two very, very accomplished educators, speakers, who are creating so much in the field of education. I would like to first introduce Dr. Neeta Inamdar. She's an education enthusiast and the head of Manipal Centre for European Studies, which she started in 2009. The center is funded by the European Union Jean Monnet Share in 2017. In addition, she has also ventured into the Manipal University Press and has more than 200 titles to her credit. Mrs. Avnita Bir is the principal of R.N. Poddar School, Mumbai. She has more than 3.5 decades of experience in education, a very, very accomplished educator, member of the governing body of CBSE. She received National Award for Teachers by the President of India in 2009. She has also been awarded by the Singapore government. She was invited by Google to speak at their headquarters. And she has a passion, which is the interface between educators and technology. So a very warm welcome, Dr. Neeta and Avnita, to this session. Having said this, I'm an educator myself, and I run an EdTech company. So the topic of today is, and as we have seen in the last 2 years, almost the entire world shifted to education technology, whether it be schools, colleges, So my first question is to Dr. Neeta. Do you have any insights about the emergence of digital dimension in education in the last few years? What are your insights on that?
Okay, so generally when you look at education and technology, generally we speak about the school education. I have also, though I work largely in higher education, I have also had some kind of encounters with the school education in some of our projects. So what is looked at is when it comes to education, technology in education that's been around for quite some time, around 3 decades and almost, and there's been quite some discussion on getting technology into education. But the storm of EdTech is a new one, and that is quite recent. And though it has been there, it has, especially during the pandemic, it became a big rage. Of course, it's been there even before that. So when it comes to these two things, one is technology in education and EdTech. I think we'll have to see them a little differently. When you say technology in education, which we have been speaking about for 2 to 3 decades, 3 decades for now, it's basically about using technology to assist or to support education. But what we now have in terms of EdTech that you do is basically education through technology. So the involvement of technology in these two different, if you look at these two as two different stages of this connect between technology and education, it has considerably increased in recent times. And the EdTech companies already came into being a few years ago. I think it's been a decade or so that they have been making some prominence in the education sector, particularly at the school level. And especially in India, definitely for grade 10, 12, there's been so much work that's going on into EdTech. When it comes to higher education, of course, there's been the technology in education was not so much talked about. Though it has been there, it is especially some of the universities have been trying to get some level of technology into their, adding some kind of a digital infrastructure in their universities. Not much has not happened until the learning management system, the LMS, came into being and introduced at the higher education levels also. So today, recently, when since March 2020, a lot changed for the entire education world with COVID-19, and the biggest challenge came to education sector. And I'm sure Avnita will have a lot more to speak about what happened to schools and school level education. I would like to say a little more about higher education as to how, despite all preparedness, what difficulties it faced. Maybe I'll come to the difficulties a little later, but if you see the emergence, I think we are all taken by a storm of the new technology in education in the last 1.5 years, particularly, though it has always been there. Even before the pandemic happened, we were speaking in terms of massive open online courses. MOOCs, we have been talking about. Swayam was introduced even before that. But how popular were they until the pandemic happened? It was as if the world was preparing itself for a pandemic. It feels like that. But recently, these things are becoming more coming to a platform for discussion in after the pandemic. Maybe I'll stop here and leave the floor to Avnita.
Okay. Avnita, what are your insights as far as school education goes and the emergence of technology? Either partly relying on technology, using technology as a tool, or having more reliance on technology through education technology. Yeah. We'd like to hear your thoughts on that. You're muted.
Yeah. So I want to begin by saying that, while I've been a great technology enthusiast, there was a time when I was, like all educators, like all teachers, I felt the big elephant in the room. Technology was the big elephant in the room. Everybody was scared. I think it could be because it was unfamiliar, uncharted territory that one had to, that one was scared of, one was fearful of. Also, the uncertainty attached to technology. Even now today, as I'm speaking to you, I'm not sure, whether the internet is going to support me. I've had a very bad day with the internet this month, the whole day. And so this uncertainty that comes with technology is something that, of course, affects everybody, but more so educators, because teachers have always had a very, it's always been a very complacent kind of profession that they have, been part of. So technology, of course, it has existed, like Dr. Neeta said, in education for over 3 decades. It began with in the form of radio, television, films in education, which would supplement maybe textbook, information and knowledge. But the revolution did not really happen. The kind of expectations one had from technology in education were not really met. And I think it is only now, since the last 2 years, when the pandemic struck, and we've seen huge strides in the way technology has been embraced. Maybe we were forced to, we were compelled to. It has really become pervasive. We were so pervasive in our lives that everybody had to kind of, in order to survive, change was upon us, and we had to transition. We had to, embrace the change. So if I were to look at, over the last 3 decades and how, and especially digital dimension in education, where schools started to set up computer labs, and some progressive schools also then went on to have a computer, a desktop computer in every classroom, which was initially attached to maybe a television screen and later on to interactive whiteboards, so that, visual content would become more alive in the classroom, and teaching and learning would become more interactive and more engaging. So that was the first phase where computers came into schools. Okay, and that was between the 1980s and 1990s. Again, I must say that the focus was more on what is the ratio of students to computers in the school. So it was more of frill value. It was more to tell parents or to tell society that, we have technology, we've embraced, we've integrated technology in our schools. And, and so private schools would maybe look at it as an excuse to hike up their fees and to make it look more, as if they were offering better technological infrastructure. So therefore, the use of computers was more as a frill value. Perhaps it replaced the typewriter, and we were, using computers to type our question papers and things like that. But the impact of computers on teaching learning really didn't happen so much. Okay, in the first phase. And then in the 1990s, when the internet, with the coming of the internet, this was the second phase of the digital technology coming into schools. And that's when the whole wide, web, the world of web opened up. And again, there was this huge expectation that teaching learning was going to be impacted. We would be able to move from, teacher-centered instruction to student-centered teaching and learning. Again, very high expectations, but the fear of technology remained with teachers, because while we introduced technology in schools, okay, I think what was really the core reason for why it was not effective, why it did not produce the kind of results that it was expected to, was because it was assumed that teachers would just embrace technology, and not enough investment was made in teacher training, in professional development programs for teachers, and teachers would be used to teaching through lectures and through textbooks, found it, they were resisting the technology in the classroom. They were fearful, of course, of using something new. They also somewhere felt that technology might replace them, or it might dehumanize education. So all those myths about technology became very, very strong. It was very strongly felt. And I know that some progressive schools did invest in teacher training, and I was fortunate enough to be in some institutions where, it was embraced, and it was, the fear of trying out, new ways of teaching was, kind of removed. So it was a non-threatening environment, and that was very important to get the fear out of the teachers to try something new. So experimentation required building a culture. So I think many schools, while they brought in the technology, while they built in the infrastructure, while they had the internet, the high speed, whatever, they did not build a culture where technology could really show its impact.
Exactly.
So and that's the reason why till the pandemic happened, we felt there was so much resistance coming towards the use of technology, towards the integration of technology. I do remember that I was one of the early users of the Google suite of apps, because it came actually as a need for me, because this is the time when there were education reforms, examination reforms being introduced by the CBSE in the country. And it meant that work was going to increase manifold times for teachers. And so I felt that maybe we need to have a technological solution which would help us to make our work more productive, more efficient, more effective. And that's when I started to research on how could technology be more than just frill value. Okay, and that's when I discovered, and again, it was accidentally that it happened. Okay, it was not somebody in a very concerted manner. Technology is something that you have to learn by getting your hands dirty. Okay, so you have to so I myself learned the tools, and then I got the teachers to start experimenting a little, create this culture that it's okay to fail, doesn't matter, even if technology fails, doesn't matter, because even at Google, I've seen that sometimes their technology fails. So, building that kind of confidence in teachers, okay? All right to experiment, because that's how innovation is going to happen. That's how change happens.
You make a very valid point.
That, when the...
Yeah, sorry. No, sorry, I thought there was a voice lag. Yeah, please carry on.
Okay. Yeah. So, I've always felt that teachers have been the ones who've been talking about constant change being constant. Okay, and they've been the most averse to change. And so this, when the pandemic struck, it was like the proverbial wolf had really come. So change was upon us. Okay, this change that we've been talking about being a constant, and inevitable, because actually we were living that change. And that's when the teachers, kind of geared up. And I must say that, during the last 2 years, the kind of change that educators and schools and teachers have experienced, it's almost like a watershed moment for schools and educators.
Yes.
So
You make a very
that's
valid
been my
point,
experience.
about teachers having that resistance to technology, being afraid of it, because teachers generally like to teach with, a traditional blackboard, writing on it, and the human interaction that they would like to have with the students. You also make a very valid point that the pandemic has definitely brought in many changes in the dimensions of education. So we will talk a little bit about that. So what kind of challenges, we faced in the last 2 or 3 years, and how, it could be in relation to access to technology, or systemic diversity. So I would like to hear Dr. Neeta's thoughts on that. Could you tell us a little bit about your experiences regarding the challenges faced?
Yeah. So when the pandemic struck, and it was in March last year that it was announced we are all going online. So just as Avnita said about school teachers, we found that professors in universities were very underprepared to enter into a new world altogether. And suddenly when the classes were to shift completely online, even in a university that I come from, which speaks about digital infrastructure and digital transformation. We have a policy for digital transformation, and that's a big one. I mean, the entire university is geared up to this. Even then, there are these professors, some of them who have been used to the chalk and talk approach to education, found it so very difficult to go on to any new learning management system, because the new learning management system were immediately introduced, and training programs were organized for faculty members immediately as soon as it was announced. But it all happened so sudden. Even they had to be conducted online. And I attended quite a few of these webinars online in that period between March and June, July. And initially, people did not even know how to behave in a webinar. People would say hello to everybody, and people did not know how to use the technology. There were a lot of problems initially. But I think over a period of time, people tried to get their hands on to this technology. In university professors, I'm sure, I think majority of them were very uncomfortable to move into online mode. Of course, just going online, whether it was in Google Classroom or Teams or many options. I shouldn't be taking names because others would be left behind, because there's so many options today. But what happened that some of them provide immense possibilities, because many people initially complained that there is no interactivity in these online platforms. But then there has been so much of technology evolution in last few years that there are lots of possibilities of creating interactive platforms on these learning management systems. You can conduct polls, you can ask questions, they answer, there are discussion boards, so many options. But unfortunately, as Avnita said, it was not easy for the professors to cope with these kind of developments. On one hand,
And
on the other, you go ahead, maybe.
Part of the reason is also because I think one aspect was, grappling with the changes that were happening, and the whole shift from physical to digital, And I think the second reason was also, even in, reasonably affluent families, availability of systems, computers or tablets. You can't have 4 systems in a house, right? So all of these were posing a challenge, according to me. Yes, please carry on, Dr. Neeta.
Yeah, what happened was, whether it is school education or higher education, there are 2 things we need to take into account is access to devices and access to internet. And both of them have been problems, especially in the student population. Studies have shown that only 30% of Indian student population had access to both computers and handheld devices. So, and we are talking about, and this entire student population itself is a small fraction of those who can actually have access to education. So we are actually talking about a small fraction. However, EdTech is thriving because even the small population of a 1.4 billion people is a big number. But we are looking at this situation. There's so much of a digital divide in the country that it's very difficult to expect everybody to cope with technology. So on one hand, wherein I live in Manipal here, and there is students generally come from different backgrounds here, maybe from different bigger cities who have access to internet, access to technology. Conducting examination was a problem even then. So how do you conduct examinations online? So are there platforms which are foolproof? Especially for smaller classrooms, it was fine because I offer a master program in which there are 15 students. I can conduct an examination, shifted the entire thing. We had to innovate. We had to innovate and come out with very different kinds of evaluation systems to be put in place at that time, which we did. But for larger numbers, whether it was an engineering class or a management class with 60 students, proctoring these examinations online was a major challenge. Teaching learning is one thing, evaluation was another. And there were a lot of questions raised about the entire evaluation system in the online era. Especially, and students suddenly started complaining they do not have access to it. It can be true. Suddenly something goes off. They're writing their examination and the internet goes off and they didn't know what to do. There's a power cut. So do we really at the national level have this kind of a digital infrastructure that we can actually move into this? Or should we? But of course, we cannot stop. We are already there. It's become inevitable. We'll have to move in. But idea is only to create that kind of a digital infrastructure for ourselves. And there were some very interesting movements led by students to collect all old smartphones from people who had multiple smartphones. There were initiatives where people collected them, gave them to younger students. And they were really heartening to see some of those initiatives reaching those people who had no access to technology. So quite some things happening. It's been a very, very happening phase for Indian education system particularly. But still,
you also raise a very important point about the examination, and the ethics that go into it. Because I run an online company, right? So we used to get requests from students in the US for AP exams because the AP exams went online and they would actually want a teacher to work with them during the examination. And I would say, no, we don't do that because that is unethical, right? So you raise a very valid point about the ethics, in online education. We will come to that a little later. But I would like to hear from Avnita about the challenges faced in schools. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So apart from the fact that, nationally, we've seen this whole, issue, the challenge of, the digital divide. And it has, whether it was computers or it was the internet, the access was not equitable, right? And though internet and technology was supposed to, ideally should have democratized education, and education should have been accessible to all, right? That seems like such a logical conclusion of, how technology is, and that you can scale with technology, and, you can reach out to audiences across, you can reach out to students across the world. But in reality, in India, with access not being equitable, it hasn't really happened. So, and COVID, I think the pandemic just kind of, emphasized, and it kind of exposed the underbelly in the the inequity in our country. So many children, yes, of course, have fallen off the learning curve, and not just students who don't have access. I think even students who have access, I think the fatigue of the screen over a period of time, so it was fine for a short period of time. I know that initially there was fear and anxiety and trepidation about the change. And then I know that teachers geared up and they started to really, learn new tools. And I found there was so much excitement and that aha feeling that, they had discovered a new app or a new tool that they could use in their classrooms and make their, teaching learning more efficient and more engaging. And I saw a lot of innovation happening. I must say that, I've seen, and across, not just my school, I've seen across the board, because I also found there was a lot of sharing happening. So people were trying out new ideas, new tools, and sharing, because they just found that now time was no longer a constraint. Distance was no longer a constraint. We could reach out to schools. I remember we had teachers from other schools sitting in our classes, and our teachers attending their sessions, so things like that. So a lot of collaboration, and something which had never happened in the teacher, fraternity. They were always so close-chested, tight-chested about their resources, and today they were all sharing. So that's the positive of the change that happened. But what I felt, so there was excitement that they were learning. There was this aha factor. And then, of course, I still feel that, when I look at a class and I look at a screen, and especially when there are a large number of students and their videos are off, okay, and you see these colorful bubbles on the screen, and you just cannot feel, you cannot sense what they're going through, what they're thinking. Okay, you can't feel their pulse, and that's something that one has felt so proud about. Face-to-face teaching and learning, yes. That was missing. So that emotional disconnect, those bubbles were just not enough for a teacher who wants to connect with her students, right? And then, of course, so initially there was this euphoria about the fact that yes, we can at least teach. Okay, so it all is not lost, and the whole world is going through this thing, and across, so yes. Everybody, so we're all in it together. It was that phrase which kind of kept us going. And of course, the fact that we had something to do in the morning, you get up and, you have a class to take, you have students to interact with. That was a big savior, I must say. Otherwise, during the pandemic, to be stuck at home and not being able to get out would have really affected all of us mentally, emotionally, psychologically. And then, of course, there were this huge surge of webinars, Zoom sessions, of training and sharing. And then that fatigue started to hit us. But the good thing I realized was that, each time we would say, I'm getting a little tired, somebody would come in and say, okay, let's just do something different. So students, I found, were very sensitive to teachers. Okay, so they would say, okay, in the evening, can we have a session? Okay, can we have a music session? Okay, so they would sing for us. They would, do some kind of entertainment for us, or they would create. They took us on virtual voyages. Virtual. These. Yeah, so they took us across the world. So every Saturday we would have those sessions. So a lot of, I must say, a lot of like bonding happened with students in that sense. It was just that while you're teaching in class and the children, their video is off, you don't know whether they've understood or not. Yes. That was a big challenge. So that was, of course, with the use or the operation of, how technology works and how online classes happen. But overall, I would say that, of course, as a country, definitely this whole systemic diversity in terms of access is something which is disturbing. So I also have to add here that, I have been on some panels where there were these, educators and principals and leaders of government, of public institutions, and the kind of good work that they've done, the way they've reached out to their students who do not have access. Yes. So there are these stories, there are individual anecdotes and stories and narratives which are very heartening. So everything's not lost. And I would say that as a country, we've done really well.
I think so too. And I think the teachers have also been very innovative to find out apps that will work in low model cell phones. See, if you look at an average family, say, we were talking about the systemic diversity and the socio-economic divide. If you look at a family, which is below the line, you really have only one phone, which is mostly with the man of the house, right? And it may not be a smartphone, Yeah. So the government school teachers have really become innovative. I know this from the household help that we have, how they have become innovative in keeping the children engaged. Like you said, of course, yes, a few children fell off the learning curve, which is unfortunate. Maybe when things get back to normal, we can work with them to get them back up. But this is really the whole, the sense of innovation and necessity makes a human, right? So they really went out of the way to find new ways to collaborate with their students. And it's very heartening to know the initiatives that the students took themselves, to, like you said, to hearten the teachers. So very, very nice to hear the positive stories. So this comes to, I would like to bring the next point up. So do you think that, EdTech solution providers, need to look at things a little more diverse, to sort of address the various gaps that are there in this sector, So I would like Dr. Neeta to share her views on this. What sort of innovative solutions do you really think that we should bring to the table?
Okay, so just as always, there are heartening stories, as you said. I have a mathematics teacher who works with me on her PhD on making mathematical teaching bilingual to enhance the learning abilities. Actually, she's trying to find out if that helps. Bilingual teaching learning helps mathematical abilities among children. So the kind of effort she took in reaching out to her students during the pandemic was extraordinary. So there are many such examples where people have done. However, equally true is the fact, in fact, Azim Premji University conducted this large study across the nation in which they found out that the learning curve is very badly affected among the majority. Almost 90% of the children have forgotten to read and write in a particular segment they're talking about. I mean, we can refer to the results of that study that they have conducted. They're available. But it's so disturbing to read. 92%, 95% can't read and write the same way they used to before the pandemic happened. So if that is the case, then I think that's a segment I wish the EdTech company starts looking at. One, have such innovation that makes education accessible to children that is at a lesser cost. I think cost is a very important factor for this particular segment, and therefore a low cost technology that has a larger base, larger reach, that can be thought through, and a lot more investment can go into research in that direction, because that's a very, very large segment in the country that we are leaving behind, and we cannot afford to do that. So even when it comes to higher education, the scenario isn't different. So just as I said, there are some universities where there is a digital infrastructure, there's a digital transformation plan in place to go ahead and accept the change. But I just have some other universities in the neighborhood here in this region who are struggling to meet the new demands. They are not able to go with online education despite all innovations that are happening. So the biggest problem is the affordability. So it's a technology which is made affordable to a larger public that can actually bring in a change in the education sector. And I feel a lot of innovation is needed. Not only that, there is also a need to simplify it somewhere. Yes. So what happens is, when I come across these learning management systems, which are very complex, of course, it provides a lot of possibilities, but also it comes across as something a little more intimidating, that I don't know how to use it. So simplification and affordability, if they become the focus of the technological innovations, then I think we can do a lot more good to the education sector.
Yeah, very valid points. Avnita, your take on this?
Yeah, so I have to just share with you that ironically, just before the pandemic struck, and in the month of Feb 2020, I was at a conference in Delhi, and it was a conference on EdTech. I've been like I said, I've been a great enthusiast about technology, so I keep getting invited to speak at on the subject of education and technology. And something very strange happened. So there were these two rooms where speakers were speaking, and one was a room where there were teachers and educators and principals, from the education, from schools. And there was the other room where there were EdTech companies who were making their presentations. And it was like, and I sat in both the rooms and I heard the arguments, the presentations, and both were at war. This is just before the pandemic. So the EdTech companies were saying the schools are just not open. It's very difficult to make a breakthrough into schools, and they just don't want to even look at technology and how it's going to help them. And educators saying that EdTech companies think they can take us for a ride, and they want to bring in these products which we don't want, and things like that. Okay, this is just in the month of February 2020. Okay, and while I was there, I do remember that I got a call from my management saying that we may have to go online. Are you prepared? And send us a plan on how you would, go online. How would you have online classes? Okay. So, and so this is, it was strange that, we were discussing technology and education as two disparate, fields. Okay. And so of course, like I said, in our school, we've been great enthusiasts and we have experimented a lot. So for us, it was a very, very seamless overnight transition. Like, even before the lockdown happened, we had grade 12 and 10 already in school. And we were able to, without a single day of learning loss, we were able to transition. Okay. And my belief always has been, because I've been working with a lot of tech in education, and I feel that, educators, and in conferences, you'll find that there are edtech companies which are working in isolation of educators, and educators don't feel, and therefore, so there is a disconnect between the products that they were making. And this is, of course, before pandemic. A lot has changed since then. And the products that they were making, and they were thinking this is the problem that they will solve in the classroom. Well, that is not really a problem which the teachers really wanted to solve, right? So I believe that it is at the intersection of educators, that is teachers, and edtech companies and entrepreneurs who would invest in that innovation will happen. And that was always something that I believed, that, schools, maybe they need to have maybe some technology experts who would handhold them and take them through this whole process. And also the tech companies would know what is the kind of pain points the teachers have and where they could plug in their solutions. So that was what was missing. But and of course, so what happened, like Dr. Neeta said, that, many of the technologies, tech products are not user-friendly. The user interface is not easy, or they're not customizable, or they're expensive. And if you have to invest in, as a principal, if I have a budget, and if I have to invest in technology, but I don't know which is, there are a range of products, and I don't understand. Okay, so and it was also a very disorganized market. EdTech was quite a disorganized, unorganized market, and so and therefore we found that the best results were not coming, despite the fact that we had amazing products and we had teachers who needed the products, but they were not coming together. So over the last 2 years, I've seen that even a company like Google, or even Microsoft, or even Zoom, the way they have, polished or they have tweaked their products, especially for education, because I know that initially we had hiccups in terms of, privacy and students, playing up and things like that. And the EdTech companies were constantly watching and working with schools and educators to see where they could make, some changes in their products, so that, they were better aligned. So I think it's been a great journey in terms of integrating technology in education. And as we go forward, I'm sure that, while we may jump into, wanting to do away with technology because we've had so much surfeit of it, but I'm sure that technology is here to stay, and, the acceptance is much, much more.
Absolutely. I think both of you make very valid points that simplicity and user friendliness will carry the integration of technology in education very far, and also understanding the pain points of educators. That is very important for technology developers. Very valid points, and I agree with them. So, coming to a very interesting topic, which is regulation, right? Regulation in EdTech, the policies, security, laws. I think as a country, we are still very, very weak in cyber laws. There are many cyber crimes that happen on a day-to-day basis, and there are no laws to safeguard people, right? And the policies and the the responsibility of the educators, responsibility of the parents, responsibility of the students, and responsibility of the lawmakers, right? So there are many stakeholders in this, and I'd like to hear Dr. Neeta's views on this.
Yeah, there are quite a few questions raised about privacy when it comes to this online education. In fact, we teach some subjects. I'm teaching master students, where we discuss about cultural analysis and European identity kind of a course, where we do discuss about populism, we do discuss about political left, political right, especially what happens. All these are very, very sensitive topics about immigration, migration laws. So such sensitive topics are being discussed. We are used to having kind of a meeting room kind of atmosphere. 8 to 10 students sit with me, we discuss. There's so much of, and it's an old world where we open up. Okay, so when the minute it is being recorded, people become more sensitive. So it's kind of an invasion of this private space that is shared between a student and a teacher. And because we do discuss, so we had to sign an undertaking with our students saying we would record them whenever some student is traveling, is not able to attend because of internet connectivity, whatever issues. So they send a request to record our classes, but we did sign an undertaking at no cost can that be publicly used or any social media platforms. We have seen so many issues happening on social media by divulging what is actually otherwise a classroom discussion. So even so these are kind of privacy issues that have happened. And then when it comes to examination, we came across a couple of issues with some very good universities where the proctors were complained that the proctoring was being done online, and some people complained, particularly women students complained that they felt they were being treated differently, and they were asked to lower the cameras and something. Quite a few privacy issues, and there were very, very serious concerns that were raised.
Yes.
And very serious concerns about the privacy of a woman student or a girl student were breached in the name of proctoring, and there were serious questions raised about. So these questions, we have not been able to find solution to some of them as of now, but the regulation, I think it will take some time for people to understand that these need a different kind of regulation if at all we are conducting examinations online. So what becomes more important? Again, it is also a problem with the entire system where there's so much emphasis being given on evaluation than on the learning. So we need a kind of a systemic overhaul and a lot more thinking, a critical reflection on how do we deal with this new space that is created? How do we use it? Both the teachers and the students will have to come to make sense of this new world, and the regulators also have to come in and say, okay, this is what can be done, what cannot be. But there are ethical concerns. There are also legal concerns about the privacy matters. I know, but I don't know how it is in school conditions of the schools. Avnita probably will be able to reflect more on that.
Yeah, very, very serious, issues that have to be carefully considered, and policies and laws have to be made to address them. Yeah, Avnita.
Yeah. So I think we've always known that technology has its boons and it's it's a boon and a bane. So a fine balance that one has to maintain and as till as such time where the government comes out with appropriate policy. And like I was just thinking about the fact that we're since we're now using technology, and we're also trying to look for data analysis and analytics to help us to have insights into how children are learning and improving their learning by getting more data insights. So we do need that, and at the same time data is an issue. Okay, when we are sharing data, that becomes an issue.
Yes.
So again, the whole this period of transition where we're trying to balance the good side and the bad side is going to be difficult. But just like I was thinking of in the space of hospitality, when Airbnb came up. Okay, And, so they were not following, they could not follow the same, or we could not have the same policy with respect to Airbnb, what we had for hotels, right? We had to change, a new policy, or similarly Uber. So all these new age technologies that are coming in, they require new regulation, new policies to be put in place, So, as we move, as time passes, I'm sure governments will work on this, because I also have to say that, with technology, you don't even know all the kind of pitfalls that you might have. Okay, so I'll give you an example that, when we had a parent complaining to us about a student who about his, some student who had put something on Instagram about his daughter. Okay, so and he said, I'm going to the police and I'm going to be very upset, and somebody from your school has done it. So I called all the students of that class and I was talking to them, and I said, whoever has created that, they'd made an Instagram public page, some page for that, and confessions page or something like that. And I said, whoever has created that page, will you just go and delete it? Okay. The entire staff was trying to resolve this issue. And this, of course, a few years ago. Okay. And, and so they were all sitting there, and the students had just finished an exam, and they were all like, can you let us go home? And I said, no, we will not go home till we resolve this issue. And I was very politely telling them that we're not going to get angry with you. We gave them the, the rundown on what could happen, when you are irresponsible. And we said, just get up and just go to the computer lab and delete it. Okay. Little did I know that, deleting an Instagram page does not mean that you have to go to the computer. They can do it on the phone. So suddenly one student got up and said the page is deleted. And I said, oh my God, I never thought of that, So it will always take us by surprise. There'll be challenges that will keep coming up. We would never be fully prepared, So that's something that we have to accept. And I think what is important, therefore, is to build, and this will happen at individual levels. I don't think government can do anything about it. It's at the micro level we need to have built trust and a value system. Teach children ethical, practices and things like that. I think that will go hand in hand with technology.
Absolutely, there is the macro level, policy and lawmaking, and there is a micro level, individual level. The ethics and values that have to be developed, and not just in children. It has to stem from parents as well. Like I mentioned, somebody asking for a teacher to be online during an exam is completely unethical, right? So, I'm sure, I don't know whether the parents were aware of it, but many students did contact us and we said no. So, so these are real, points to consider when we are taking forward this new dimension.
Yeah, I want to add a point here. You know what? There is also another problem during initial times, particularly in school education, was this teacher bullying of teachers, by parents. This teacher bullying became a major issue in Indian context, where parents would sit through and comment on teachers' communication skills or their pronunciations and make fun of them, put them on social media and say, this is the language, this is the kind of English if the teachers are speaking, what would our children learn? These kind of things. But they were completely blind to the fact that some of these teachers are very, very underpaid. And definitely there's so much of a change that's needed in teacher education and teacher employment. There is a teacher welfare that needs to be taken into account. All of them were not discussed, and some of them were openly shamed.
That is, I agree with you.
Very, very difficult situation. And who is to be blamed for this? The entire, as a community of parents, of community of teachers, who is to take responsibility for this that happened online? So we need to mature. All of us need to mature. The parents, as parents and teachers, what can be done? And open shaming of teachers was really a very, very difficult phase for some of the school teachers. I believe I've heard of stories about it.
Yeah, it's very sad when there is a lack of respect, and sensitivity, which is why I said, even at the micro level of individual level, the ethics and values and the sensitivity have to be developed for this new age that we are beginning, So that brings us, we have about I think 10 to 12 minutes to wrap up. So What do you see as the future of education technology? And what do you foresee in the near future, the far future? We'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Avnita goes first this time.
So I think, like I said, technology is here to stay. We've all tasted it and we've all seen the benefits of it. It may, what form it will take may change as we go along. One of the things that I have learned during this period is that there's nothing that, remains the same. So the normal is not going to be, I mean, when we go back to normal, the normal is going to be not the same old normal. I do hope that we take back with us the lessons that we've learned in terms of empathy and reflection and compassion and making the world a better place. We've got an opportunity to change some of the things that we were, that we've not been doing correctly. And going forward, I would say using technology in the most efficient manner, in the most positive manner. It will definitely, we'll be able to leverage the advantages that technology gives us to our advantage and to, in our practices. I mean, I'm sure that, for example, when it comes to school teaching and we have to do remedials and we have to do revisions, that can go online we have where we need the teacher to be with the student face to face. That should, that can happen in the physical space. So a mix of the hybrid. Of course, the hybrid will vary as we go along. It will vary from classroom to classroom. And so we have to be prepared that it will not be a very clear path. So we have to be prepared that there will be ambiguity, because when there is change, it is a VUCA world. After all, we've all now realized the VUCA world has actually, been experienced. We only, so far we were just using it as jargon, but it is something that we've all learned to deal with. It's volatile, it is uncertain. There's so much of ambiguity, we don't have answers. So again, when people ask me, are we going to school, going to open, not open? I say, I cannot say. I mean, they may open and close again. So,
yes.
So we have to be prepared that we have to adapt, be nimble and agile, and keep recalibrating our policy practices, whatever we are, as and when it is needed. So flexibility is going to be the order of the day.
Very true. Dr. Neeta?
Yeah. So when it comes to thinking of the future, a lot has changed in last few months and is going to change, and technology is here to stay. Yeah, and it's about its acceptance and how much we are able to embrace it. It all depends on what lies ahead of us. In fact, when it comes to international education, that's one thing we did not touch upon so far. I work largely in the area of international education, and we have realized now we are all speaking in terms of virtual mobility. Okay, we are speaking in terms of virtual mobility of students. So initially it did not make sense. Does it really make sense? How can somebody be virtually mobile? But that has been happening in recent times. There's a lot of research that's going on about how these virtual mobilities have been made possible, and all this is possible only through technology. So there's been a very positive development on one front, where some of my students are sitting here, some students in a partner university in Europe. Because I work in European studies, I have partners in Europe. Some of them, they all sit together, they work. We have classrooms which are opened up to their students. Their classrooms are opened up to our students. There are some courses which are shared. There is some material which is shared, and there are projects which students are working together. So this comes as a very, very positive development to me, despite my having all reservations that I've spoken about, when it comes to technology and education. My only concern is about leaving somebody behind. I'm not against accepting of technology, but only thing is I just want it more accessible to all that beauty is accessed, all that possibilities are accessible to all of them. So that way, if you see in international education, there's so much happening. And virtual mobility, they're calling it virtual mobility because students sitting here are able to study courses in some other universities. Last time it so happened, generally all our students in my program, they go to Europe for the second year of studies. For one batch, it was not possible to travel. So what technology made it possible that they sat here, they were in India, but were attending classes in partner universities in Europe. And the learning teaching method was different. The material used were different. So whatever they were to gain, they did gain, however, not completely. Because by being in a place, by learning the cultural understanding that they would have gained by physically going there would have been very different. However, at least some facilitation was possible. Imagine if it was not for technology, they would have been completely
denied that experience.
Completely denied experience. Here, at least there is some part of the experience that they were able to get, if not the full. So, of course, it cannot provide the same experience as an actual mobility of a student, but at least to some level, the virtual mobility did do its magic during this period. So, so it's almost like, it's always like the typical, half glass of water. See it as full, you see it as half. So it's completely, it finally comes to that when it comes to technology in education, I believe. It is up to us as to how we see it. And as of now, it continues to be the half glass. And we will have to see, we cannot escape it. We have to, and it's not just accept it, but its idea is to embrace it and also make it accessible to the rest of the world. Because if you look at the global level, there is some of the knowledge access has been given through technology. And that also is something that needs to be looked into. But there is also one trick in this, one thing that we need to remember, that most of the EdTech companies, globally, if we see, they're all from the West, and knowledge continues to flow from Western countries to Eastern, or global north to global south, and not the other way around. So the politics of knowledge that was there that has been there earlier in the last century or more continues to exist even in this sector. So we do not know, but I'm only happy that now there are quite a few EdTech companies coming out of India, but whether they actually provide the content that they focus on, if it is a little more India-centered, I'm not speaking in terms of that, it's not about cultural assertion that I'm talking about, but it is more about that having that kind of a shared space where knowledge is shared from both global north and global south, or east and west, equally on an equal footing, and making it really democratic that way.
Very nice, very beautiful thoughts. And, so to wrap it up, I would like to say that technology is here to stay, and we have to accept it, embrace it, see where we can leverage it, and make it a hybrid mode of education going forward. What is really required also is to have policies, laws in place to support technology in education. So very nice session. I thank you both for your time, and it's an honor to have you here at the Women Economic Forum 2021. The Women Economic Forum confers on Dr. Neeta the Award of Exceptional Leader of Excellence, awarded at the Women Economic Forum 2021. The Women Economic Forum confers upon Avnita Bir the Award of Exceptional Leader of Excellence at the Women Economic Forum 2021. So thank you so much for your time, for your thoughts, for the energies. And, as educators, I think we have a new normal and to create a new responsible normal, right? So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rajashree. You also moderated so well. I mean, the answers just flowed, and
how was the time?
Avnita, your voice broke. You were trying to say something?
I said, the time just flew. I was saying the time just flew. 1 hour. We didn't even realize it over.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of knowledge shared, and very, very beautiful experiences shared. And I think we also had a lot of positivity coming out of it. So wonderful to hear you both speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Avnita. Nice meeting you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.